So if you reach into your pocket right now and you pull out a crisp $50 bill.
Okay.
And you accidentally just drop it on the sidewalk. And before you can grab it, it blows away in the wind.
Oh, that's just, yeah, that is a horrible feeling.
Right. The psychological pain you feel in that moment is going to be intense. Like, it will absolutely ruin your afternoon.
Oh, easily. Maybe your whole week, honestly.
Exactly. But think about this. If you were walking down that exact same street tomorrow and you randomly find a $50 bill on the ground.
Just sitting there.
Just sitting there.
Yeah.
The joy you feel, it's going to be pretty fleeting. Like, you'll be happy. It might make you smile for an hour or so.
Yeah, you might buy a nice lunch, but you'll forget about it by dinner.
Right. But mathematically, it is the exact same amount of money.
It's $50 either way.
Exactly. The scale should balance perfectly, but humanly, like emotionally. Our brains are completely rigged. The pain of the loss is exponentially heavier than the joy of the game.
It really is, and it completely shatters the illusion that we operate like, logical calculators, doesn't it?
Totally.
We like to think that when it comes to money, everything is clean, it's binary, it's driven by pure physics almost, like a number goes up, a number goes down.
Yeah, just pure math.
But the reality is that the way we experience money, the way we navigate our entire financial existence is profoundly messy.
Yeah.
It is completely bound by psychology, and actually, more importantly, it's bounded by language.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We've got this incredible stack of source material today, and it maps out this fascinating multi-level guide to the language of money.
It's a really unique way to look at it.
It really is, because the material argues that the actual words you possess, the vocabulary you have, dictates your financial reality.
Yeah.
So we are going to explore how our financial vocabulary scales across 4 really distinct stages of complexity. We're going from, just standing at a counter asking the price of a coffee, all the way up to debating the systemic macroeconomic flaws of the entire world we live in.
It's a huge journey.
It is. And we'll be looking at the underlying psychology that propels us from one stage to the next.
Because language is not just this passive tool we use to point at things, It's an active framework. It literally shapes how we perceive value, how we understand risk.
Right.
By analyzing how our vocabulary evolves as we mature financially, we can actually uncover the mechanics of how humans learn to survive in a capitalist structure.
I love that.
Because you cannot manage or leverage or even critique a system if you don't possess the linguistic currency to even describe how it works. Like, the boundaries of your vocabulary are quite literally the boundaries of your financial world.
That is such a powerful way to frame it. So I want you, the listener, to really think about where you sit on this linguistic ladder as we climb it today.
Yeah, try to spot yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Let's start at the absolute ground floor, the bedrock, the foundational level of everyday transactions.
The A2 level, essentially.
Right. The sources frame this as the realm of the tangible exchange. We are talking about the very basic, visceral actions of moving resources from one hand to another.
This is the language of immediate survival. The core vocabulary at this foundational level revolves around incredibly primal verbs.
Like what?
We're talking about actions like earn, spend, save, borrow, lend, buy, and sell.
Yeah, they really do sound primal when you list them out like that. Earn, buy, sell. It feels very, hunter-gatherer.
It is.
Just translated onto a modern high street.
Precisely, because this language is entirely tethered to the physical world in the present tense.
The present tense, that's key.
Very key. At this stage, your brain is not plotting a 20-year retirement trajectory, right? You are standing in a physical location, you're looking at a physical item, and you're just calculating whether you can acquire it to satisfy an immediate need or desire.
Right.
So the ultimate driving question of this entire linguistic level is simply, how much does it cost? Or how much is it?
Let's put a microscope on that exact moment.
Yeah.
You're standing in a cafe. You ask for a coffee.
Okay.
The barista tells you it's $3. Right there, you have to make a choice about the actual mechanics of the exchange. Are you going to hand over physical cash, or are you going to use a card, like a credit or debit card?
Which is a massive distinction.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
I want to pause here because I feel like there's a huge psychological difference between those two words, cash and card, even at this super foundational level.
Oh, there absolutely is. And it really comes down to the friction of the transaction.
That friction, yeah. Explain that.
Well, when you hand over physical cash, your brain registers a tangible loss. You're holding 3 paper dollars, you physically give them away, and they are gone from your hand.
You can feel them leaving.
Yes. The neurological pain of paying is very real. But when you use a card, you're introducing the very first whisper of abstraction into your language.
Right. You tap a piece of plastic, a machine beeps, and you get your coffee.
Okay.
And you still have your plastic card.
Exactly.
The physical loss is completely masked. It feels totally frictionless.
Which is exactly why casinos use chips instead of cash.
Yay, wow, yeah.
And why arcades use tokens. When you sever the physical action of handing over the actual currency, you lower the psychological barrier to spending it.
That makes so much sense.
But, whether it is cash or card, the interaction at this A2 level remains incredibly direct. It's a one-to-one exchange of value happening in real time. You are trading your immediate purchasing power for a hot beverage in your hand.
I look at this foundational vocabulary as kind of your wallet of words.
I like that.
If you have words like buy, sell, borrow, and spend in your wallet, you can walk down any street in the world and survive. You can facilitate an exchange.
True.
But here is where I want to push back a little bit on the mechanics of this foundation.
Okay, let's hear it.
The sources point out that at this level, we rely heavily on binary adjectives. We look at an item and we declare it either cheap, meaning it doesn't cost much money, or expensive, meaning it costs a lot.
Very black and white.
Right. If you only have $3 to your name, that coffee is incredibly expensive. But by reducing everything in the world to just cheap or expensive, aren't we fundamentally blinding ourselves to the actual concept of value?
We are. It's a massive cognitive trap, actually.
Yeah.
Because relying solely on cheap and expensive means you are judging the world entirely relative to the immediate present tense contents of your wallet.
Yes.
You're not evaluating the inherent worth or the utility of the object itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like imagine you buy a cheap pair of shoes for $20, but they completely fall apart in 3 weeks.
Right.
Then you have to buy another cheap pair. And another, versus buying an expensive pair for $100 that lasts you 5 solid years.
The classic boots theory.
Right. But the foundational language forces you to call the $20 shoes cheap, even though mechanically they are destroying your wealth over time.
Because this A2 level of vocabulary completely lacks the capacity to measure time or longevity or quality.
It's totally blind to it.
Completely. It only possesses the tools to measure the immediate localized pain of the transaction today. Like, do I have enough in my pocket right now? That's it. It's a purely reactionary state of being.
Which means we can't stay at this level forever.
No, you'd never get ahead.
You can survive on the high street for a little while, buying cheap things and trying to avoid expensive things. But eventually, reality is going to knock on your door.
Yeah.
You realize your wallet is finite.
Always is.
The immediate transaction is just no longer enough to keep you alive in a complex society. And that realization, it forces a massive structural shift. You basically have to abandon the present tense.
You are forced to look over the horizon. And that transition pulls us up to the next tier of financial maturity, which the material calls the realm of the personal microeconomy.
The B1 level.
Exactly, the explorer. We are no longer just shoppers on the high street. We are learning to become the central bank of our own lives.
I love that phrase, the central bank of our own lives.
Yeah.
So let's unpack the mechanics of this shift. What actually happens to the language when we leave the physical shop and enter this microeconomy?
Well, it becomes deeply abstract. We trade the visceral reality of physical cash for the conceptual reality of banking.
Okay, so less tangible.
Right. Your labor no longer just results in physical coins placed in your hand. It results in a salary.
It is salary.
And that salary isn't kept under a mattress. It's routed electronically into a bank account.
It's like money transforms from a solid into a liquid, right?
That's a great analogy.
It comes like digital water. It just flows invisibly from an employer's server into your bank account.
Yeah.
And we interact with it through these abstract valves, basically. We deposit to fill the reservoir, and we withdraw from an ATM or a cash machine when we need to turn that liquid back into a physical solid.
It really is like plumbing. But having a massive reservoir of digital water is totally useless if you don't know how to control the flow.
Sure.
And that brings us to what I think is the most critical cognitive leap of this entire level, the absolute cornerstone of the personal microeconomy.
What's that?
The concept of a budget.
A budget. A deliberate plan for how your money will be allocated each month. I really want to spend some time on this because I think we throw the word budget around so casually in everyday life that we forget how radical a concept it actually is for the human brain.
It is entirely unnatural to our evolutionary wiring.
Right. A budget is basically a time machine. At the foundational level, we were trapped in the present. It was just, I'm hungry, I will buy this food right now.
Very simple cause and effect.
But a budget forces you to project your consciousness 30 days into the future. It forces you to anticipate the friction between your income, the water flowing into the reservoir, and your expenses, the leaks that are draining it out.
And those leaks are relentless.
So relentless.
The sources highlight the vocabulary of these recurring forces, right?
Right.
We have rent, we have bills like electricity and water, we have groceries for your food shopping.
These are systemic demands.
Exactly. Systemic demands on your reservoir. You have to allocate abstract numbers to these categories weeks before you ever experience the physical need for them. You are basically paying for next week's warmth and next month's shelter with today's labor.
It requires immense cognitive discipline to do that. And because those expenses are constantly attacking our finite income, we are forced to develop an entirely new dialect here. I love this section of the material. We develop the language of consumer defense.
The tactical language of the modern consumer?
Yes, it's the language of hunting and gathering, just adapted for a capitalist ecosystem.
Oh, totally.
We go hunting for a discount. We patiently stalk our prey waiting for a sale. We train our eyes to recognize a bargain, like spotting an item that is temporarily marked 50% off.
And what's really fascinating about this defensive vocabulary is how active it is.
What do you mean?
Well, you are no longer just walking into a shop and passively asking, how much is it? The sources emphasize the modern necessity of comparing prices online.
Oh, right.
You are researching, you are strategizing, you are actively deploying your energy and time to protect your income from infinite external expenses.
But let's dig into the psychological mechanism here for a second, because sure, clipping discounts and comparing prices online is great, but it's really just tactical maneuvering.
Sure.
The true strategic engine of this microeconomy, the phrasal verb that changes absolutely everything, is to save up for.
Yes. Saving up for a new laptop or a holiday.
Exactly. I want to push on this because I think saving up for is the ultimate test of human executive function. Mechanically, how does this actually work in the brain?
It's the linguistic manifestation of delayed gratification.
Delayed gratification, yeah.
And it is incredibly difficult for us because it requires you to actively choose an abstract future benefit over a tangible present reality.
Which our monkey brains hate.
They absolutely despise it.
Yeah.
At the foundational level, the logic was, I want a coffee, I buy a coffee. Simple.
Right.
The concept of saving up for introduces a radical disruption to that loop. It demands that you say, I want a holiday in 6 months, therefore I will intentionally deny myself the coffee today and tomorrow and the next day.
You are literally valuing your future self's desires over your current self's immediate impulses.
Yes, exactly.
You are telling your current self, no, you must suffer a tiny bit of deprivation today so that a version of me that doesn't even exist yet can sit on a beach. That is a staggering level of maturity compared to just asking if something is cheap or expensive.
It's huge. It is the psychological bedrock of all wealth accumulation.
Yeah.
If you cannot master the concept of saving up for, you are permanently trapped in the foundational present tense.
Because you spend everything.
Right. Your reservoir of digital water will constantly drain to zero because every single impulse will be immediately satisfied.
Okay, so let's say you master the discipline. You build the perfect budget spreadsheet. You track your income, you minimize your expenses, you hunt for bargains, and you successfully save up for the future. You are the undisputed master of your personal microeconomy. It feels incredibly empowering.
It does.
But there's a fatal flaw here, isn't there?
There is a massive blind spot because your perfectly balanced spreadsheet does not exist in a vacuum.
It exists in the real world, and the real world is chaotic. No matter how meticulously you manage your internal microeconomy, external macro forces are eventually going to breach your walls.
And when they do, it's a rude awakening.
Very rude. You are violently pulled out of your personal spreadsheet and forced to look at the broader systems at play.
Which serves as the exact catalyst for our transition into the third tier of vocabulary.
The B2 level.
Right. You evolve into the analyst. You are no longer just managing a budget. You are now attempting to navigate the broader national economy, and you are trying to make your money actually grow to outpace those external forces.
This is where we encounter the heavy machinery of the financial world. The language becomes distinctly analytical.
Very much so.
You take the money you've so painfully saved up through delayed gratification, and you start investing it.
Right.
You put it to work in the stock market by buying share or stocks. Or maybe you buy physical assets like real estate. And the entire mechanical goal of this action is to achieve a positive return on investment, or ROI.
But the very second you attempt to generate a return on investment, you conjure the most complex and defining word of this entire level.
Which is?
Risk.
Risk. It's literally the gravity of the financial universe. Everything revolves around it. Let's break down the mechanics of risk as the sources outline it.
Mechanically, risk is the probability of your investment failing, weighed against the potential reward if it actually succeeds.
It's a balance.
It is, and it's a spectrum. On one end, you have high-risk investments. These are volatile. They could multiply your money tenfold, making you an absolute fortune. But the probability of total catastrophic failure is extremely high. You could lose everything.
And on the other end of the spectrum,
you have low-risk investments, things like government bonds, certain blue-chip stocks.
safe stuff.
Exactly. These are incredibly safe. Your initial capital is protected. But the mechanical trade-off for that safety is that the return on investment is going to be significantly smaller.
Really?
You won't get rich quickly, but you won't go broke overnight.
It's an agonizing tightrope walk. Like, how much safety are you willing to sacrifice for growth?
It keeps people up at night.
I bet. And because human beings are naturally terrified of falling off that tightrope, the language provides us with a structural safety net.
The diversified portfolio.
Yes, which is basically the strategic dispersion of risk. Explain how that works in practice, mechanically.
So mechanically, a diversified portfolio means you do not concentrate all of your capital into a single high-risk asset. You don't put everything on red at the casino.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Precisely. You spread your money across different asset classes, some stocks, some real estate, maybe some low-risk bonds. The logic is that these assets will not all fail at the exact same time. If your high-risk tech stocks crash, your low-risk real estate might hold its value, buffering your overall wealth from total destruction.
It's like building a ship with multiple watertight compartments.
That's a perfect analogy.
If one breaches, the whole ship doesn't sink.
Right.
But even with a perfectly engineered, heavily diversified portfolio, you are still sailing on an ocean you don't control.
Yeah.
You are subject to what we could call the economic weather.
The macroeconomic climate.
Yeah.
At the previous level, you were only looking at the thermometer inside your own house. Now you have to look up at the sky.
Because the weather dictates everything. The sources point out the key macroeconomic indicators that define this weather.
Like growth, right?
Exactly. Is the overall economy experiencing growth? Is capital flowing? Are businesses expanding? Or are we plunging into a recession?
A very scary word.
Terrifying. A prolonged structural period of economic decline where capital dries up and jobs vanish.
Yeah.
But of all the weather patterns in the text, there is one specific storm that I think forces people into this analytical B2 level faster than anything else.
Inflation.
Inflation, the silent killer of the microeconomy.
It really is.
Mechanically, the text defines inflation as the rate at which prices are systematically increasing across the board. It directly drives up the cost of living.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about why inflation is so terrifying to someone who just built a perfect budget.
It's terrifying because it renders your discipline completely obsolete.
Yes.
Let's say you master the previous level. You save up $10,000 and you put it under your mattress. Or in a basic bank account earning 0 interest. You feel incredibly secure.
You feel like you won the game.
But if inflation is running at 10% a year, the mechanical reality is that the purchasing power of your money is evaporating while you sleep. By the end of the year, your $10,000 can only buy $9,000 worth of goods.
It is an invisible tax on your savings.
Exactly.
The coffee isn't $3 anymore. Now it's $4. Your rent goes up. Your groceries go up. But your reservoir of digital water hasn't grown at all.
Not a drop.
You did everything right. You delayed gratification, you budgeted, and yet you are materially poorer. Inflation forces you to realize that standing still is actually moving backwards.
Which is exactly why you must adopt the vocabulary of investing and risk. You have to expose your money to risk to generate a return that at least matches the rate of inflation just to tread water.
Just to tread water. And this realization that the macro weather affects absolutely everything completely transforms how we talk about borrowing money too, doesn't it?
It completely flips it.
Right, because at the foundational level, borrowing was just asking a friend for $20 for lunch. At this level, debt becomes a highly complex, mechanized tool.
It does. The sources draw a sharp contrast between different mechanics of debt here. On one hand, you have a mortgage.
Borrowing a massive sum of money from a bank to purchase a house.
Exactly. Mechanically, this is viewed as a strategic, long-term debt. You are using the bank's money to acquire an appreciating asset, and you're paying it back over 30 years with fixed payments.
Right. A mortgage is leverage. You are using debt to actively build wealth.
Yes.
But then the text pivots to the extreme danger of high-interest credit card debt. And the mechanics of this are terrifying compared to a mortgage.
Oh, it's a completely different animal because credit card debt is not tied to an appreciating asset.
It's tied to consumer goods, mostly.
Right. It is usually the result of funding present tense consumption with future labor at exorbitant interest rates. Mechanically, the interest compounds so aggressively that it creates a localized black hole in your financial ecosystem.
A black hole?
Yeah. The sources are very clear on this. This kind of debt is a literal emergency that must be eradicated as quickly as possible because it mathematically guarantees your ruin.
It's quicksand versus a ladder. A mortgage is a ladder. Credit card debt is quicksand.
That's a great way to put it.
And because navigating all of this, the inflation, the diversification, mortgages, compounding interest is so incredibly stressful, the language naturally starts categorizing people based on how they handle all this pressure.
Yes. This is where we see the emergence of financial identities. We begin labeling the personality types that interact with these macro currents.
Exactly. The material introduces the financially savvy person, or the frugal person.
Someone who is highly strategic and disciplined with their capital allocation.
Right. And on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, the text gives us the spendthrift, someone who acts carelessly, ignoring the economic weather entirely, and just squandering their resources.
You know, I think it's really important to differentiate frugal at this analytical level from being cheap at the foundational level.
Oh, that's a good point. How so?
Well, being cheap is a reactionary avoidance of spending money at all costs, usually because you are just hyper-focused on the immediate pain of the transaction. A cheap person buys the $20 shoes that fall apart.
Right. They're stuck in the A2 mindset.
Exactly. Being frugal or financially savvy is a proactive, strategic optimization of resources. A frugal person understands the long-term value, buys the $100 shoes that last 5 years, and invests the $80 difference.
It requires a macro perspective.
Totally.
That makes perfect sense. If the microeconomy was a spreadsheet, this B2 analytical level is standing on a high-rise balcony, watching the storm fronts of inflation and recession roll in, and strategically fortifying your position.
Fortifying, yes.
In fact, there's a conversation example in the sources that illustrates this posture beautifully. Two people are talking about the current economic climate. One person is expressing immense relief that they managed to pay off all their credit card debt right before a massive spike in inflation.
They are acknowledging the danger of the weather and celebrating their defensive positioning.
Right.
They got out of the quicksand before it started raining.
Exactly. And the other person in the conversation admits to being risk-averse. They are looking out at the volatility of the stock market, seeing the prices violently swing up and down, and it causes them deep psychological discomfort.
Which is very common.
Very. And they explicitly state that they prefer low-risk investments because they know they aren't financially savvy enough to manage a complex, highly diversified portfolio without panicking.
And you know what? That admission is the absolute pinnacle of this level's maturity.
You think so?
Absolutely. They aren't just blindly throwing money at the wall hoping it sticks. They understand the macro concepts, the volatility, portfolio mechanics, the spectrum of risk well enough to accurately diagnose their own psychological limitations.
Health awareness.
Yes. They are executing a strategic retreat to low-risk assets based entirely on self-awareness.
It's an incredibly grounded, mature way to look at wealth. You are playing the game strategically, aware of your own strengths and weaknesses. But here is where the narrative takes its final, most dramatic turn. Because once you understand the game perfectly, once you see how inflation silently drains your wealth, how interest rates dictate debt, and how risk basically controls your destiny, you inevitably stop looking at your own portfolio.
You look up.
You look up at the sky and you ask a very dangerous question.
You ask, who is controlling the weather?
Yes. You elevate from analyzing the rules of the game to actively deconstructing the game itself. You start questioning the architects of the system.
It's a huge paradigm shift.
Massive. And that thrusts us into the absolute summit of our linguistic journey today, the C1 and C2 level, the language of systemic critique.
At this pinnacle stage, the conversation completely transcends personal finance. We are no longer talking about your wallet or your budget spreadsheet or even your diversified portfolio.
We're past all that.
Way past it. We are engaging in a philosophical and structural examination of massive economic systems and the deeply hidden, often irrational psychology that underpins human behavior.
Now, I want to be very clear to you, the listener, right here. The sources outline some incredibly heavy, highly debated systemic concepts at this level.
Very politically charged sometimes.
Yes. So our goal is not to endorse any specific ideology, but to impartially explore the vocabulary the text provides to debate these concepts.
We are just looking at the linguistic tools.
Exactly. We're looking at the linguistic tools required to argue about how the world works.
Precisely. To have a seat at the table of global finance, you must possess the language to contrast opposing economic architectures. The material introduces the vocabulary to debate the fundamental mechanics of capitalism versus socialism, for example.
Right.
It requires you to articulate the theoretical purity of a free market where prices are dictated entirely by unhindered supply and demand versus the proposed necessity of government intervention and strict market regulation.
The sources even drop a specific, highly influential economic framework into the mix here, Keynesian economics.
A big one.
A very big one. And it introduces a great vocabulary word along with it. Tenet, meaning the core foundational principle of a belief system.
Right, a central pillar.
Yeah. So the text states that a key tenet of Keynesian economics is that government intervention is absolutely required to stabilize a naturally volatile capitalist economy.
Let's look at the mechanics of why that intervention is argued for, according to the text.
Okay.
In a purely free market, economies naturally experience massive boom and bust cycles.
High highs and low lows.
Exactly. During a bust, a recession fear takes over. Consumers stop spending money.
Because they're scared of losing their jobs.
Right. Because they stop spending, businesses make less profit. Because businesses make less profit, they lay off workers. Those unemployed workers now have even less money to spend, which further decreases business profits, leading to more layoffs.
It's a mechanical death spiral.
A self-fulfilling prophecy of economic collapse.
Exactly. So the Keynesian tenet argues that to break this mechanical spiral, a central authority, the government, must intervene.
They have to step in.
They must become the spender of last resort. They inject capital into the system through stimulus or infrastructure projects, artificially creating demand to encourage businesses to hire again, thus breaking the psychological grip of the recession.
Notice how incredibly far we've climbed up this mountain right now.
It's wild.
We started an hour ago by asking a barista, how much is the coffee? And now we are using words like intervention, volatile, and stimulus to debate the macroeconomic mechanics used to prevent global societal collapse.
The sheer scale of the language is breathtaking.
It really is.
But this C1, C2 vocabulary doesn't just allow us to describe how these systems operate. It equips us with the surgical tools to critique their outcomes.
It provides the language of structural disparity.
Disparity, yeah.
The sources tackle some critical, heavily loaded vocabulary here. It introduces the concept of the wealth gap, the vast canyon-like chasm between the absolute richest individuals in a society and the poorest.
And deeply intertwined with that chasm is the concept of social mobility.
Oh, that's a crucial one.
The mechanical ability or, the systemic friction, preventing it for a human being to move up or down the economic ladder over the course of their lifetime.
Right.
This vocabulary allows us to articulate how systemic poverty is not just a lack of funds, but a structural cage that can lock generations of people in place, regardless of how frugal they try to be.
The material highlights a specific critical argument using this exact language. It posits the idea that certain current tax policies might exacerbate this wealth gap for disadvantaged communities.
Exacerbate, meaning to make an already bad situation worse.
A very strong word.
It is such a heavy, devastating word in this context because when you say a policy exacerbates systemic poverty, you are implying that the system isn't just passively broken or inefficient.
Right.
You are arguing that the mechanics of the system are actively deepening the wound. It is an intentional critique of the architecture itself.
It is a vocabulary designed to hold power accountable.
Absolutely.
But, if deconstructing these massive macro systems is one half of the summit, the other half requires us to take that incredibly powerful microscope and turn it entirely inward.
Oh, I love where this is going.
We have to look at the flaw in the machine and realize the flaw is us.
Yes.
Yeah?
This is absolutely my favorite part of the entire deep dive, the pivot into behavioral economics.
It's so fascinating.
It is the intersection of evolutionary psychology and financial mathematics. It is the exact moment where the cold, hard math finally admits that it has feelings.
Well put. Behavioral economics is the study of how deep-seated, irrational human biases fundamentally corrupt our financial decision-making.
It breaks all the rules.
It completely upends the traditional classical models of how economies are supposed to work.
Yes, because classical economic theory, as the text explicitly points out, presupposes, meaning it assumes as an absolute foundational truth before the debate even begins, that human beings are rational economic actors.
Which is a bold assumption.
Very bold. It assumes that if you put a human in a room with financial choice, they will perfectly calculate the mathematical probabilities, strip away all emotion, and execute the logical decision that maximizes their wealth.
The robot theory.
Right. And the entire architecture of the free market relies on this assumption. But I have to challenge this violently, because doesn't the behavioral concept of loss aversion, which we talked about at the very beginning, prove that this assumption is complete and utter fiction?
Let's debate the mechanism. How do you see loss aversion dismantling the rational actor theory?
Okay, let's play a game.
All right.
Imagine I offer you a coin flip right now. If it lands on heads, I will give you $150. If it lands on tails, you have to give me $100.
Okay, I follow.
Mathematically, this is an incredibly positive expected value bet. A perfectly rational economic calculator would take this bet every single time because the potential gain outweighs the potential loss by 50%.
It's a mathematically sound bet.
But in reality, if you offer that bet to a normal human being, most of them will refuse it.
I would probably refuse it.
Exactly. Why? Because the sources define loss aversion as the psychological reality that we feel the pain of a loss significantly more intensely than we feel the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
Studies actually quantify this,
Really?
Yeah, the psychological pain of losing $100 is roughly twice as intense as the joy of winning $100.
Exactly. We are terrified of the loss. So we refuse the mathematically correct bet because our emotional circuitry just overrides our logical processing.
It shuts it down.
We are not logical calculators maximizing utility. We are biologically rigged apes driven by messy, deep-seated emotional currents like fear and greed.
It is a profound realization. Behavioral economics demonstrates that the very foundational assumption of the A2 level, that money is just a clean binary exchange of value, is fundamentally corrupted by human emotion.
Corrupted from the start.
Yes. We will routinely make irrational, mathematically destructive decisions simply to avoid the emotional sting of a perceived loss, or out of a greedy herd mentality to chase a perceived gain.
Right.
Our financial language has to evolve all the way to the C2 summit just so we possess the intellectual capacity to admit how profoundly irrational we actually are.
The sources drop this absolute mic drop of a sentence. It says, "We are far from the rational economic actors that classical theory presupposes."
It's a great line.
That one sentence destroys hundreds of years of economic modeling. If the actors are irrational, the whole stage play is chaotic.
And this realization of our own inherent irrationality naturally leads us to the final, ultimate philosophical synthesis of this entire journey.
Okay, lay it on me.
If the macroeconomic systems we live in are inherently volatile, and if our own internal psychological operating systems are biologically irrational,
Which they are.
right, then we are forced to question our foundational relationship with materialism and consumerism. We have to confront the biggest, most terrifying question of all. Do wealth and happiness actually correlate mechanically?
Wow. The ultimate boss battle of financial vocabulary.
Exactly.
To answer that, the text unpacks this incredible paradigm-shifting concept of diminishing returns on subjective well-being.
Diminishing returns.
Let's break down the mechanics of diminishing returns first. In a factory, if you add one worker, production goes up. Add a second, it goes up more.
Makes sense.
But eventually, if you keep adding workers to the same small factory floor, they start bumping into each other. The 1,000th worker you add actually makes the factory less efficient. the benefit of adding more diminishes.
Right. And behavioral economists apply this exact mechanical principle to the accumulation of wealth and human happiness.
Explain how that works in our brains.
Well, the data is incredibly consistent on this. Moving from the A2 level of poverty, where you literally can't afford a coffee, to the B1 level of financial security, where your rent is paid, your budget is stable, and you are not terrified of eviction, provides a massive, life-altering spike in human happiness.
Like a vertical line on a graph.
Exactly. The relief from stress is profound.
So money literally buys happiness when it is buying you out of misery.
Yes, exactly. But once you establish that basic security, the curve flattens dramatically.
It just levels off.
It really does.
Yeah.
As you move into the B2 and C1 levels, accumulating excess capital, building massive portfolios, buying luxury cars, the mechanical correlation between that extra wealth and your day-to-day subjective well-being begins to break down.
The returns diminish.
Exactly. $1 million might make you slightly happier than 100,000, but 10 million does not make you 10 times happier than 1 million. You hit the point of diminishing returns. The extra zeros in the bank account cease to provide any tangible emotional utility.
It fundamentally and aggressively challenges the entire consumerist culture we live in.
It really does.
Because we exist in a hyper-capitalist system that constantly broadcasts a single, relentless message. More is always better. Infinite growth is the only goal.
Buy more, earn more.
Right. But possessing this advanced vocabulary, understanding the psychological mechanics of diminishing returns, it gives us the intellectual armor to stand up and say, actually, mathematically and psychologically, more is eventually pointless.
It is the mark of profound maturity. You have spent your life acquiring the linguistic currency to understand the foundation, to manage the microeconomy, to navigate the macro risks, and build wealth.
Yeah.
But the ultimate power of the C2 language is that it finally gives you the tools to critique the blind pursuit of that very same wealth. You master the game so completely that you realize you no longer have to play it obsessively.
Wow. Okay. Let's take a deep breath and just look back at this incredible mountain we just climbed. Because this evolution of language is truly a map of human development.
It is a remarkable trajectory.
We started on the ground floor at the A2 Foundation. We were standing at a physical cafe counter, trapped in the present tense, asking a barista, how much does it cost? And grappling with the immediate pain of handing over physical cash versus a plastic card.
Then we evolved into the B1 Explorer. We realized our resources were finite, so we abstracted our money into digital water.
Of plumbing.
Right. We built the psychological time machine of a budget to manage the war between our income and our expenses. We learned the defensive language of discounts, and we mastered the profound executive function required to delay gratification and save up for the future.
And from there, we scaled up to the B2 analyst. The walls of our microeconomy were breached by the invisible tax of inflation, forcing us to look at the macro weather.
Looking at the sky.
We learned to strategically deploy debt, we built diversified portfolios to shelter from risk, and we developed financial identities based on our self-awareness of the chaotic economic climate.
And finally, we reached the C1 and C2 summit. We stopped merely playing by the rules and started questioning the architects. We debated the volatile mechanics of free markets versus Keynesian intervention.
Right.
We used the language of disparity to critique how systems exacerbate the wealth gap. And through behavioral economics, we exposed our own deep-seated irrationality, realizing that fear and loss aversion constantly hijack our logical minds.
We traveled from the instinctual high street to the most abstract halls of economic philosophy. And for you, the listener, I think the core takeaway from all this source material is vital. Your investment in your own financial literacy is the only asset that is completely immune to inflation.
That's a great point.
Money is not just coins in your pocket or abstract digital water in a banking app. It is a complex, evolving linguistic lens. It is the primary lens through which we are forced to analyze the structure of our society, the deeply flawed psychology of our own brains, and ultimately, our personal values.
You are blind to the mechanics of reality if you do not possess the vocabulary to describe them.
Exactly. So I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you step back into the economic weather of your own life today.
Okay.
If the study of behavioral economics proves that primal emotions like fear and greed constantly make us act irrationally,
Which they do.
and if our absolute highest level of vocabulary teaches us the mechanical truth that excessive wealth has severely diminishing returns on our actual happiness,
Right.
then perhaps the ultimate goal of mastering this incredibly complex language of money is not to figure out how to endlessly accumulate more, Perhaps the true mastery of this language is finally possessing the wisdom to recognize when you have exactly enough. Until next time, keep diving deep. You know the exact moment I'm talking about. You're at a dinner party or like a networking event, or maybe you're just standing in line for a remarkably overpriced coffee.
Oh, yeah, the inevitable line.
Right. And someone turns to you, and within exactly 45 seconds of making eye contact, they ask you the question. It's totally inevitable. So, what do you do?
It is the universal, inescapable icebreaker of the modern age. I mean, you can't avoid it.
You really can't. But depending on how you answer that question, you aren't just telling this random stranger how you pay your rent or your mortgage. You're handing them a blueprint of your entire identity.
Exactly.
You're revealing exactly where you are in your professional evolution. And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive today. We are decoding the secret language of the modern career.
Which is such a massive topic.
It really is. We are unpacking this fascinating source document today. It's basically a multi-level linguistic guide to how we talk about our careers. We are not just looking at vocabulary here. We're decoding how the exact words people use to describe their jobs actually mirror their professional evolution.
Right.
So from the basic, survival mode phrases of a rookie all the way up to the existential system-level debates of a labor market futurist.
And it is a critical skill, right? And yet it's one we rarely pause to analyze. Being able to articulate your professional story isn't just about nailing a job interview. It dictates how you share a massive central part of your life story with the rest of the world.
Totally.
I mean, the language you use doesn't just describe your reality, it actively constructs it.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this structure, because the source material categorizes this career language into 4 distinct levels of complexity. It uses the CEFR scale, so from A2 to C1 and C2. Think of it as a ladder. You have the foundation, the hustle, the ecosystem, and finally the futurist stage.
Right, the 4 stages.
Yeah, and whether you are just starting out in your field, or you're hunting for a major career pivot, or maybe you're already leading a massive multinational team, understanding this language ladder is going to help you completely strategize your own professional narrative.
Because that structure perfectly mirrors the actual messy trajectory of a human career, Like you don't start your very first job on day 1 talking about macroeconomic shifts in the global supply chain.
Right, no one does that.
Or the philosophical implications of algorithmic management. You start by just trying to figure out where the bathroom is.
Yes, or how the coffee machine works.
Exactly. And what your actual job title means in practical terms.
You have to build the basement before you can design the penthouse.
Right.
Which means before you can analyze a career, you must be able to name it. So we're going to begin at the foundation.
The ground floor. This is where we establish the absolute non-negotiable coordinates of our professional existence. Basically the what and the where.
So at this foundational level, the A2 level in the source text, the goal is purely about establishment. The language is incredibly straightforward, almost brutally simple.
It really is.
You are simply stating what your job is, where you work, and what your basic daily tasks are. So the key phrases are things like answering that classic, what do you do question with, I am a, or I work as a.
Like I'm a teacher, or I work as an engineer.
Exactly. And then naming the physical or virtual location, like I work from home, or I work in an office, or naming the company itself, I work for Google. And describing simple tasks using really foundational verbs, answering emails, talking to customers, writing reports, going to meetings.
It is entirely focused on the concrete. I mean, there is no abstraction here at all.
Right, and think of this foundational level as it's like the business card of conversation.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, like it's flat, right? It's two-dimensional. It doesn't tell you if they're a brilliant accountant or a terrible one.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely essential as the foundation of a house. Without this basic orienting language, no further professional conversation can even be built.
What's fascinating here is the deep psychology behind this simplicity.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, if you look at human history, our identities used to be completely fused with our labor in a very literal way. Think about medieval surnames.
Oh, right, like Baker or Smith.
Yes, Cooper, Carpenter.
No.
Your name was literally your task.
You didn't have to explain your job at a 14th century dinner party like, I'm John the Baker, I bake.
Exactly. But today, our jobs are so highly abstracted, so removed from physical, tangible output, that we desperately need these foundational sentences just to orient ourselves in space and time. At this early stage of a career, our professional identity is deeply, almost exclusively tied to concrete nouns and simple verbs. We define ourselves by our immediate physical or virtual surroundings. The office, the home desk, the team of 5 people. And we define ourselves by our direct managers.
Like you might simply state, my boss is very nice.
Exactly. It is a binary, immediate world.
Let's actually spend a few minutes unpacking a specific example of this from the source, because it perfectly illustrates the pure functionality of this stage.
Yeah, the graphic designer example.
Right. Imagine a junior graphic designer. If you ask them what they do, their foundational script sounds like this. I work as a graphic designer. I work for a small marketing company. I design logos and websites. I work with a team of designers, and I talk to customers about their ideas.
It's beautifully simple. It's almost innocent, really.
It is. But look at the mechanics of what is happening in those sentences. Every single statement provides a clear, unambiguous anchor for this person's professional identity.
Yeah.
And notice what's missing. There is no corporate jargon yet.
Right. None at all.
There is no talk of, synergizing cross-functional deliverables or optimizing brand alignment. It is just, I design logos, I talk to customers, action, object, action, object.
And we really shouldn't underestimate the profound psychological comfort of that clarity.
What do you mean?
Well, the modern corporate world is terrifyingly ambiguous, right? Before the complexities of the corporate world set in the office politics, the performance metrics, these basic sentences give you a solid, unshakable footing. When you say, I answer emails and write reports, you are claiming competence over your immediate environment.
Oh, that makes sense.
You are establishing that you belong there, that you have a function, and that your function is real, tangible, and necessary.
It's a survival mechanism. Like when you're dropped into a new job, your brain is just in fight or flight mode. You just need to know what buttons to push, what screen to look at, and who to report to.
Exactly.
But here is the catch. The foundation is just that, a foundation. A basement is a great place to wait out a storm, but you don't want to live there forever.
No. Eventually, the honeymoon phase ends.
Right. You realize you don't just want a desk. You want a career. You want to grow. You want to earn more.
Yeah.
And the second you decide to leave that initial foundation, the language you use has to fundamentally mutate. You can't just list what you do anymore.
No, because you have to prove what you're worth.
Which brings us to the second tier of our language ladder, the hustle.
The transition from passive existence to active pursuit. This is where we step up to the B1 level in the source to explore the language of the job hunt, and we see a massive tectonic shift in the vocabulary we use.
Yeah, the shift from tasks to value.
Right. We transition from talking about basic tasks to talking about skills and responsibilities.
So let's walk through the mechanics of this hustle, because the job hunt detailed in the source is a really highly ritualized sequence. First, you are scanning the horizon, looking for online job vacancies or openings. Then you have to formally apply, and this involves a very specific set of documents. You submit your CV or your resume, depending on where you live. The source makes a distinct point about the British CV versus the American resume. And crucially, you send a cover letter. But I want to stop right here because I really have to play devil's advocate for a second based on this dialogue.
Go for it.
We are talking about modern career language.
Yeah.
And the source talks about this cover letter process. But is writing a specific cover letter for every single job actually necessary, or is it just busy work? I mean, in today's automated market, are they just hazing us?
Well, it's a fair question, especially when it feels like you're just sending your documents into a digital void. But if we follow the logic of the source text, it isn't just busy work. It proves the applicant is serious.
Right.
It's the first tangible evidence that you understand their specific problems and have taken the time to position yourself as the solution. But the cover letter is just a symptom of a much deeper shift happening at this level. We are no longer just saying what we do, we are defining our value.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, the language completely shifts from simple actions to ownership. You stop saying, I design logos, and you start saying, I am responsible for managing the brand identity.
Oh, yeah.
You adopt abstract competencies. It's no longer just talking on the phone. It's communication skills. It's problem solving. It's working well in a team.
That is such a subtle but aggressive shift. You take a daily annoyance like fixing a broken printer and you brand it as problem-solving capabilities.
Exactly. You're taking those concrete verbs from the foundation and elevating them into portable assets.
And that completely explains the immense anxiety of the interview process that's mentioned in the source.
Oh, absolutely.
Like when people talk about being terrified of interviews, it's not just stage fright, it's the pressure of this exact translation process.
Yes.
You have to sit in a room under fluorescent lights, across from strangers, and perfectly practice talking about your past responsibilities to prove why you were the exact right person for their future. You are basically translating your past foundation into future value for a new employer.
An interview is, at its core, an act of translation, and it's high stakes. You have to convince them that the raw materials you gathered at your old desk have been refined into universal skills that will solve their specific problems.
And if you succeed at that translation, you get the prize, the job offer, which you can either accept or reject. But let's say you accept. You've successfully hunted down the job, but now what? How do you survive, adapt, and actually climb within that new ecosystem?
This is where we elevate again. We leave the hustle behind and move to the analytical level, the B2 level, the strategist.
Right, because the conversation completely moves from getting a job to building a career path. You quickly realize the workplace is an ecosystem.
It is, and ecosystems can be complex. This is where you have to learn the language of workplace dynamics.
You have to start asking critical questions about the environment. Like, is the corporate culture genuinely collaborative or is it highly competitive? What is the actual work-life balance? And then you run into the mechanics of performance reviews. What does it actually mean to meet or exceed expectations?
This level requires so much critical reflection. You are evaluating your trajectory within a system.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. The source focuses heavily on the concept of constructive feedback. And if you think about it, this language is so delicate. We are literally framing criticism as something intended to help you improve, rather than just pointing out your flaws.
Yeah, we had to invent a padded phrase just to handle it.
Exactly.
And that connects directly to the emotional weight of work that really comes into focus at this level. At this stage, we use language to weigh benefits, the salary, the perks like health insurance, flexible schedules against deep downsides.
Like long commutes or high-pressure environments.
Precisely. And look at the emotional vocabulary from the text. This is where people talk about feeling burnt out or unfulfilled, which often leads to resigning or handing in their notice.
Right.
Versus the flip side, which is achieving a strong sense of job satisfaction and seeking out promotions or job security.
Let's actually spend some time analyzing the source's dialogue example for this, because it's so rich. They give an example of someone describing their new role as a steep learning curve, but saying it offers a better collaborative culture than their exhausting competitive past job.
It's a great example.
Every word of that is strategic. Steep learning curve is brilliant framing. It acknowledges difficulty, but frames it as an upward trajectory.
Right. I'm not failing. I'm just climbing.
Exactly. And they're contrasting that exhausting competitive past with a new collaborative culture. This requires so much critical reflection on one's professional life. This person isn't just an employee anymore. They have elevated to a career strategist. They are managing their emotional reserves and charting a path.
They are playing the long game.
But even the best strategist is still playing on a board someone else designed. So what happens when the very ground beneath the global workforce shifts? We've mastered our personal career paths, but now we reach the final systemic level of analysis, the C1, C2 level.
The futurist.
Right. The discussion completely expands beyond the individual. We're talking about the future of work, automation, artificial intelligence, and completely redefining what the very concept of a career even means.
At this level, you are a critic and an observer of the macro forces at play.
And there is a crucial quote from the text that I really want to highlight here. It says, the salient question is not whether automation will displace jobs, but how we can reskill the workforce for the economy of the future.
It's a vital shift in the narrative.
It is. But this leads me to a really pointed question for you and for anyone listening. According to the source, why are soft skills, things like critical thinking, creativity, emotional intelligence, why are they suddenly our greatest professional assets rather than our hard technical skills? Like, we've spent decades being told to learn technical skills. Why the flip?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it actually makes perfect sense. It comes down to what machines can do. Hard technical skills are, by definition, rule-based. They follow patterns, and anything that follows a predictable pattern is highly susceptible to automation.
Right. An algorithm can learn the rules faster than we can.
Exactly. But soft skills, empathy, radical creativity, navigating complex human conflicts. Artificial intelligence struggles profoundly with these nuances. They are messy and context-dependent. So paradoxically, the soft skills become our most resilient assets. They are less susceptible to automation.
Wow. Okay, that makes sense. But technology is just one piece of this. The source also critiques the shifting models of work, specifically the portfolio career and the gig economy.
And we really have to unpack the dual nature of this shift because it's massive. On one hand, the gig economy offers unprecedented flexibility. You have autonomy.
You're your own boss.
Exactly. But that flexibility comes at a severe cost. You trade away job security and social safety nets, which leads to a fundamentally precarious workforce, and precarious meaning it's not securely held, it's likely to collapse at any moment.
Precarious. That is such a heavy concept. You're building a house on shifting sand. You don't have the job security we talked about back at the strategist level.
No, and this fundamentally changes the psychological contract between employer and employee. The era of lifelong loyalty is over. It has been replaced by what the source calls the protein career.
The protein career, what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it comes from Proteus, the shape-shifting sea god. A protein career is entirely self-directed. It is driven by your personal values rather than by a single organization's goals. And the crucial part here is that the onus, the duty or responsibility for development is squarely on the individual.
So the company isn't taking care of you anymore. You have to reskill yourself, build your own brand, and find your next gig. The onus is on you.
Precisely. You are on your own.
And that leads right into a huge philosophical debate raised in the text, which we should really devote some time to. What is the actual purpose of a career? Like, is it merely for sustenance just to pay the bills?
Yeah.
Or is it a vehicle for self-actualization and vocation?
It is the ultimate question of the modern workforce.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because there is this massive movement, particularly among younger generations, where people are seeking purpose beyond a paycheck. They want their jobs to align with their deeply held values.
Right. They demand that work provides self-actualization. And exploring how that works requires synthesizing trends from technology, sociology, and psychology. You have to understand all of these to understand modern work.
It's asking a job to do an impossible amount of heavy lifting. But it completely redefines how we answer that initial question, what do you do? It's not just a title anymore. It's a statement of values.
Absolutely.
Wow. We have covered an astonishing amount of ground today. We started at the foundation, looking at simple job titles and basic tasks. Then we moved to the mechanics of the job hunt and the hustle, translating tasks into value.
Yeah, moving from action to assets.
Exactly. Then we elevated into career strategists, analyzing workplace culture, performance reviews, and emotional weight. And finally, we arrived as labor market futurists, debating automation, the gig economy, and the purpose-driven protein career.
It is a massive evolution.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? It means that talking about your work is not just stating facts. It is an ongoing, constantly evolving story of your personal growth and adaptation in a rapidly changing world. The words you choose actively shape your professional reality.
They absolutely do. And I think that leaves us with a final, really provocative thought to mull over, building entirely on those final concepts from the source material.
All the way on me.
So if the modern protein career shifts the onus of professional development entirely onto the individual, and if younger generations are increasingly demanding that work provides deep self-actualization and personal purpose,
Right.
What happens if the gig economy or mass automation makes finding that perfectly purposeful work impossible for the masses? If our jobs can no longer guarantee us self-actualization, where else in our lives must we begin to look for our sense of vocation?
Oh, wow. Yeah, if work isn't the answer anymore, we're going to have to find a completely new place to look.